Shadowbringers is the latest expansion for Final Fantasy XIV, and it's been out for almost 3 weeks now, so I wanted to put together a review on it. So, like I've done with all of my reviews, I do try to keep them as spoiler free as I can, because personally I hate spoilers and I don't want anyone to be spoiled by watching one of my reviews. So, spoiler free, I'm not gonna tell you any story spoilers, I'm not gonna show any bosses or trials, none of that. I do have to have, gameplay in the background, so I'll probably just pick like one of the early dungeons for the story. So with that, let's get started. So the first thing I want to talk about is the story. So the story in an MMORPG doesn't have to be great because for the most part it serves as flavor for your adventure. It's meant to take you from point A to point B to get you from another dungeon to unlock the content. It doesn't have to be good. So it's surprising that Final Fantasy XIV has always been able to still give you a really good story. So much so that if you only, play the story, you're still getting your money. It did start off back in a Rome Reborn kind of cliche, light versus darkness kind of thing. But it has evolved beautifully, and Heavensward had an amazing story, and despite what people say, I still like the Stormblood story. But now Shadowbringers just hit it out of the park, and it's easily the best story that they've told in this game. And part of its success is the way that it connects all the way back to a Rome Reborn. So, in a Rome Reborn, we're talking about like 6 years ago. There's several characters, plot points, and character arcs that are resolved now, 6 years later, in a way that really makes you question whether the authors of the story, whether they had this impressive vision that they basically planted the seeds 6 years ago, and we're seeing the fruit of those seeds now. Did they have that forward vision, or are they just that skilled that they were able to beautifully link events and characters from 6 years ago to now in a way that felt natural and that resolved, these characters and these plot points in a way that was satisfying and was really good. Like that's really the main thing that I love about Shadowbringers. As a player that has been playing from the beginning, it truly felt like the journey that I've had with my character meant something. Like I left a mark in this world, and I'm seeing the effects of it 6 years later. That's really the thing that I loved of the story as I went along, because it was nostalgic remembering all these events and things that I did before, that I've seen before, and that I've heard of before. So that's the main, the biggest reason why I love the story so much, but it's not the only one. They did away with or rather they turned it around, the cliche light versus darkness, where light triumphs over darkness and darkness is bad and light is good. Here it's different, where light is the antagonist, so to speak, and we're trying to bring darkness, which was normally associated as the evil. So they did manage to make it a little more unique, more interesting, a more interesting premise, and overall, it's just the best story for me personally, with a great antagonist. I won't spoil, obviously, and the final fight, which again, no spoilers, is amazing. Many people were comparing it to the Nidhogg trial, and I can certainly see why, because the story payoff is great. Like if you follow the cutscene and the story, it starts escalating to the point that you're invested emotionally in the fight. So it's not just a question of clearing the fight just to clear it and be like, I'm done, but rather you feel like something is at stake and you're invested. It makes the fight that much better, and it's one of the reasons why I always love following the story, because it makes the fights and the dungeons and everything more meaningful, because you know why you're there and what you're doing. So this expansion, the story was amazing, and the climax, the last few cutscenes are some of the best I've seen in this whole game. And I was left in awe, honestly. Like it was just brilliant. So if you're someone that pays attention to the story and you've been paying attention for the story, to the story from the beginning, then you're in for a treat. And I definitely say that if you're someone that doesn't pay attention to the story, then you should. 'Cause it's great, honestly, and it's definitely gonna be better for someone that's been playing from the beginning. I know there's a lot of new players. There's always new players coming in, but I feel like this story was crafted with veteran players in mind. Now, transitioning from the story over to the actual content, like the trials, the dungeons. Now, the dungeons are nothing spectacular. They don't wow you like the story did, but they're all good. They're unique. They have several unique mechanics, cool bosses, and accompanied with good music. They're all great, and they make the leveling experience nice. The trials are the ones, and particularly the 8-man raid, which released yesterday at the time of recording, so I can't talk about that in this review. So for the trials, they were already known the names of the bosses and like their general look, so it wouldn't really be much of a spoiler to say. But Titania and Innocence are the two trials during the story. There's the final trial as well, but I won't say the name or anything about it. Just like I said before, it's probably the best trial ever, and I can't wait for the extreme. But for Titania and Innocence, now Innocence, it's a cool boss, the way the boss looks, but I'm not really that much of a fan of the mechanics or the like the music or the environment. But Titania was amazing. The music is haunting and kind of it reminds me of the Mogul King music, because it feels like a Dr. Seuss track or like a Disney track, but being kind of haunting and kind of scary. So I love the Titania soundtrack. I love the boss design, and the fight is just so dynamic, and there's so many mechanics, one on top of the other, that it's an entertaining fight. And it made for a good end game experience after you beat the story and you have to beat the extreme version. Now for Eden, I was wowed by the Eden fight. So I did them yesterday. They again, at the time of recording, they released yesterday, which is July 16th, and I was just amazed because I went in as hoping that they could deliver, because Shadowbringers has just been so amazing that I wanted every bit of it to be amazing, and they didn't disappoint. The fights from the first all the way to the last, I won't say like any spoilers, but I just love how creative they were with their mechanics. So if you've played Final Fantasy XIV for a long time, you come to the point where you can identify mechanics just by seeing the familiar indicators. Like you can immediately tell, oh, it's a stack. I got a stack with the party. Oh, I got a marker for like an AOE. I got a spread. But these fights they keep you on your toes, because while there's still familiar mechanics, there's also some mechanics that are like unique, and it really made every fight feel fresh, not only from one another, but from other fights previously in the game. So they were a blast. The bosses were cool, the music was cool, and the fights were just fun to do. And I can't wait for the Savage difficulty, where I'm sure it's gonna be like crazier. So they definitely nailed it with the trials and the dungeons, and I can't wait to see more, because obviously we're gonna keep getting more fights, more trials, more dungeons as we go. So I can't wait to see what other dungeons and what other trials, specifically, what other trials are we gonna see, and how the rest of Eden is gonna pan out. The story of Eden is also interesting so far, has a unique premise to it. So moving on to more, well, first the music, because I was gonna go over to like more like the gameplay aspects and changes they did. Now the music, just to be brief, the music has always been great in Final Fantasy. I've always been a fan in any game of having good action, like good gameplay and good like bosses and encounter design, combined with good music. Because when you have like a cool boss and a cool arena and cool mechanics and amazing gameplay, and then you have like a killer soundtrack behind it, it just enhances all the action, the whole gameplay. So the music, as it's always been, is great in Shadowbringers. I particularly really like the final dungeon boss music. Of the bosses in dungeons, like the first two always have like a more generic music, and then the final boss of the dungeon always has like a unique track shared with all of the dungeons. So that music, while initially was kind of, I felt like a downgrade from the Stormblood one, it eventually ended up winning me over, and I love it. I actually downloaded it. And then as we go for like the music for the actual fights, again, like I said before, I love the Titania music, and Eden has several great tracks as well. So they nailed it with the music as they always have. And the best track is the final trial of the story. Again, no spoilers. That one just had killer soundtrack. Can't wait to get the mount on that so that whenever I'm going anywhere with that mount, I just have that music playing. So now we can move on to more of like the gameplay, like the classes and the changes they do. So as usual, they always add like new, as you go from 70 to 80 now, whenever there's an expansion and you have the 10 new levels, there's always new skills for every class, and there's always reworks for every class. Skills they take out, skills they add, things they tweak. Now, with the exception of healers, I'm not a healer main. I only have white mage is the only healer I've ever had, and I had it at 70. It's the only healer I've played, and it just happens to be the only healer that's actually good as far as everyone says. Again, I don't have any experience with astrologian or scholar, but from what I've heard and seen other people say, they they messed up the healers because they took away like a lot of their DPS tools to force them into this pure healer job. And the healers were like extinct pretty much because throughout most of the expansion, like it has been less so in the last few days, but in the beginning, if you were not a healer, the queue times were long. So healers, because the new jobs do not include a healer, and the changes that they did, healers are not happy right now, and that's probably the only like bad change for the classes overall. But as far as it goes, because I'm mostly a tank main, so I really like the changes they did for tanks. No stances, like no DPS stance, so you only have your enmity stance, and it doesn't affect like the damage dealt. You don't have enmity combos anymore. They took like the mana and TP cost for the AoEs that you can use to pull enemies. So they really made tanking feel a lot better overall. So I'm a big fan of those changes. I can't really speak too much for the DPS changes. I haven't heard too many complaints on any of the DPS. They all seem to perform really well, and I'm looking forward to leveling myself like Dragoon, Samurai, Ninja. They all look like they had some really great changes. And the tanks themselves, Paladin got a gap closer. The Dark Knight is a lot better because the Dark Knight was like the worst tank towards the end of Stormblood. So I think that if they can fine tune like the changes they did to the healers, then maybe we can arrive at a place where every class feels great. And now the new classes. Now I haven't really played Dancer because I'm mostly a melee person. Like all the I had all the melee DPS max level 70, all the tanks 70, and then for ranged and casters I only have the bard and the machines at max level. So I can't really speak for the Dancer. I know people really like so far the Dancer. It seems fun, and the buffs they bring are substantial, especially for the dance partner. That's the most notable thing I've seen with people in any party being like, hey, can you dance with me? So they're playing just like with the Dragoon Eye. People fight for that buff. Now for Gunbreaker, the other new class, the new tank. Now that I can speak about because I actually logged in day one, for the early access, and the first thing I did was get the Gunbreaker and immediately started leveling it up to 70. The moment he was 70, then I started to do the story with the Gunbreaker, which is the same thing. I did that for Stormblood, though it was more because of the Raoban extreme, thing stopping anyone from doing the story. So I leveled Samurai as something to do while they fixed that, and then I ended up with Stormblood with the Samurai. But it really enhances, the new expansion, that not only is it new areas and new story, new dungeons and whatnot, but you're also playing new class. So Gunbreaker is my main. So from then I went on to level, I do have Dark Knight at 80 as well. I still have to level the other two tanks. But Gunbreaker is really fun. Like, it's my favorite tank right now. I still have to level, like I said, Warrior and Paladin to see if maybe. Because I used to be the Warrior main for most of Stormblood. So I will have to wait and see play with all of them. And I am thinking of maybe doing like a review of the 4 tanks once I have all of them at 80. So the Gunbreaker is a lot of fun, mostly because he just feels fast. He has his base combo, and then he has his Smashing Fang combo, which, because of the continuation skill, he basically has 6 hits back to back, and you have like Blasting Zone, which is an off GCD. Like, they have so many skills that you can hit back to back that it just feels like you're so fast and you're just beating the crap out of anything. It's exhilarating to play. So I really love the Gunbreaker so far, and they have, tools to support the party with the Heart of Light, a mod that reduces the damage the party takes. You have your gap closers. You have several cooldowns, including, healing over time that you can apply to someone else if they need it. So overall, I love Gunbreaker, and it's still my main. It's the main tank for me right now, because I love Dark Knight. I leveled it to 80, but I still prefer the Gunbreaker. So that's story, music, the encounters, the changes for the classes, and the new classes. So I think that's pretty much everything for the expansion. Maybe we can talk about the new areas. Overall, the areas are, the new areas are, yeah, I don't want to say they're all great, because there's some that look a bit more dreary, like not anything amazing. I really like Ilmeg, for example. It just feels like so colorful and unique when compared to other areas. And then there's, the Yulmore, when you see it from the outside, it looks really cool. So overall, the areas, the final area is really interesting. I won't spoil it, but the final area is really, because I was about to forget, but the final area is really cool. I'm not gonna spoil it again, because there is certain things that transpire to get you to there. But it really reminded me of like Bioshock, and I love Bioshock, so I really feel like the final area, and particularly the last, where the last few story bits and the final dungeon and trial are, that area is some of the best designed I've seen in Final Fantasy. Okay, so there will actually be a cut in the video, because when I was recording, there was someone knocking on the door, so I had to pause the recording, go and open the door, and then I couldn't get back to finishing the recording. So I'm actually finishing the recording on my day. The review, I'm gonna end up uploading it later than I expected to, but I'm gonna finish it now, even though it's kind of an awkward cut. But I didn't, I was speaking for like 20 minutes almost, so I didn't want to have to go back and re-record the whole thing just so that it could be one continuous, unedited, commentary. So the last thing I was talking about was the areas in Shadowbringers and their design. So actually, after finishing the recording and thinking about it, I forgot to mention, now that I was talking about the locations, that the Rakita Gradewood soundtrack that plays is also in the music. That I didn't mention that in the music section, but that's probably the best soundtrack of any area in Final Fantasy XIV, period. So that just goes to show, further that the music in this expansion is spectacular. So back to the areas, like I was saying, I really like Ilmeg, and I really like the Rakita Gradewoods, and there's, the areas are good. The thing, the biggest change when compared to like Stormblood is that Stormblood had these like Japanese and Oriental themes to most of its locations. Here, however, they don't have that theme, so they were able to create more, like mythical fantasy-ish areas. So they had like a lot more freedom in how they could like color and design the area. So each area is like vastly different from one another. While in Stormblood you could kind of feel like the same theme. So it has that working for it. There's nothing wrong with either way. Like I really enjoyed the Stormblood area, but the Shadowbringers area, they look more, as in a fantasy RPG, which would appeal to, there's a lot of people that prefer that over the Stormblood approach. So overall, I think I went over everything. I covered the story, the jobs, some of the changes that they did to the existing jobs, the dungeon and trial design, the raid design, the music. So yeah, overall, this has been a fantastic expansion. So we still have to look forward to a lot because, as with any Final Fantasy XIV expansion, it's not over when we get, we get the expansion. 2 weeks later, we get the raid. And 4 weeks after the expansion, we get the Savage. That's not the end. So down the line, we'll get more dungeons and more trials and extreme for like the final boss trial. We're gonna get more raids. Eden still has, if it's like it's always been, there's still like 8 more floors or encounters to grab. So there's still a lot to look forward to, and I can't wait to see what else this expansion brings us. So yeah, that's it. Overall, it's been a fantastic ride, and I can't wait to continue. Now, this review is more to share my thoughts, because the more I thought about it, anyone that's invested already in Final Fantasy XIV, because I know a lot of players are new, maybe they're like starting. I've been reading on Reddit, for example, there's people that maybe are still in Heavensward or in Stormblood, and they have Shadowbringers there. But for anyone that was already up to date and anything, they don't need a review. They probably already pre-ordered and got it on early access. They don't need anyone to tell them whether the expansion is good or not. So I guess this is just to share my thoughts, and maybe if there's anyone that watches this that maybe it's on the fence, they see all the hype with the new expansion, they maybe never played Final Fantasy XIV, maybe they're just on the outside looking in, and they're curious. So definitely Final Fantasy XIV is worth, playing. Like right now you can get in for cheap. You can get the game with like Heavensward, Stormblood, and Shadowbringers. I believe for like 60 maybe. And then I think they still do the month free when you're new. And yeah, you have to pay like monthly for a subscription service, but it's very much worth it, because every month that you pay, you get a lot of playtime and content in that month. And they always deliver. After the 40 that you pay for the expansion, you have like, what is it, 2 years? Yeah, you get 2 years between expansions of getting just free content every few months to keep you coming back, or just to keep you playing continuously. So I think that it's very much worth the money. So if you're not playing Final Fantasy XIV and you are interested, I would give it a try. There is a free trial as well. So again, don't want to ramble anymore. So that's it for my review. Really enjoyed it, and I hope you enjoyed the video. Now, one last thing I'll say is that I'm thinking of making more content for Final Fantasy XIV. I've been playing it since launch on the PS4. That's back like in 2014. But I never posted any to my channel, so I decided to try and do it now with Shadowbringers. So I might post more things, like I mentioned before, maybe like an overview of the tanks after I have all of them to 80, maybe a guide for like Savage. It all depends on what, I'm not gonna make any promises, but I'm looking into what more content I can bring. So again, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.